Zim is now a fat, blobby mess, oozing fluids and intestines, almost bursting at the seams. It's a disgusting and disturbing sight, and it begs the question how Nickelodeon even approved this episode. The subject matter is just so far removed from anything Nick has ever dealt with. It's absolutely bizarre. While the episode is dark and disturbing in its own way, things get even darker when we take a look at Scott Dulesky. On October 15, 2005, Dulesky murdered his neighbor, Pamela Vitale. He was a minor at the age of 16 at the time, so he did not qualify for the death penalty and was instead sentenced to life in prison with no chance of parole. During the trial, it became increasingly evident that Dulesky was fascinated with organs and often talked about breaking children's necks and wondering how the human body would function without certain organs. This episode of Invader Zim was brought up during the trial, drawing attention to certain comments he made after watching said episode. However, the two teens that testified stated that he was just joking about those comments. Although, those same teens also stated that he is not violent, and that's clearly false. So, could this episode of Invader Zim have actually inspired a real-life murder? It's hard to say without any conclusive evidence, but it's entirely possible that it didn't help if those ideas were already present in Dulesky's mind.
ManBat transformation. Bane gets too much venom. And the Joker venom. Batman, the animated series. Batman, the animated series is well known for being incredibly mature and treating its audience with respect and integrity. Some heavy themes are addressed in the show, and its willingness to never speak down to kids is one of the reasons why it has become, in the eyes of many, the definitive animated version of the Caped Crusader. Of course, and not shying away from more mature and dark themes, some disturbing moments naturally come with the territory. Given how many there are throughout the series, we will be focusing on 3 of them as opposed to just one. The first of these moments comes to us from the episode On Leather Wings. In this episode, we are introduced to the ManBat, a creature who is being mistaken for Batman. ManBat is actually a researcher named Kirk Langstrom, who was transformed into the creature after an experiment researching bats as the next evolutionary step went wrong. When Kirk reveals who he is to Batman, he then transforms right before his eyes, complete with demonic laughing, close-ups of his teeth, and his body changing while his clothes rip off to reveal his new terrifying form. The next moment is about Bane, from the episode, Bane. This episode introduces us to the titular character, the man who vows to break the bat. If you are aware of Bane, then you know he uses chemically engineered venom in order to become super strong. Well, in the climax of the episode, Batman breaks Bane's venom tube, causing an obscene amount to enter his bloodstream. This is far too much for him to handle, and his muscles grow to a grotesque size. All the while, his veins and eyes are popping out while he screams in pain. Thankfully, Batman unplugs the tubes, but for a moment there, it seemed like we were about to witness an overdose on screen. Our last moment comes from the episode, The Laughing Fish, in which the Joker unleashes a toxin into the Gotham City harbor that causes all the fish to mutate into a Joker fish with a big, toothy smile. Turns out the chemical is non-lethal to humans, and the Joker simply wishes to trademark the fish and gain a percentage over all that are sold. A worker at the harbor tells the Joker that fish cannot be trademarked, since they are a natural resource, to which the Joker responds with a threat. Later on, the Joker follows through on that threat and sends a toxic gas into the home of the worker. Upon breathing it, the worker begins to chuckle, which slowly grows and grows into an insane laugh, reminiscent of the Joker. Despite the deranged smile on his face, you can tell by the look in his eyes how much pain he's in. Batman should be but the image will forever be burned in our skulls. How much pain is the Joker actually in? We will never know. And maybe that's for the best.
The Tapeworm, Mr. Meaty. One time, Nickelodeon made a show comprised entirely of ugly puppets selling meat to equally ugly puppets. It was titled Mr. Meaty and featured two teenagers, Josh and Parker, who worked at the titular fast food restaurant, getting involved in all kinds of shenanigans. The show was not received well, especially by vegetarians and parents who did not appreciate the abundance of meat and gross-out humor. The network received many petitions to end the show, which may have played a part in its ultimately short existence. Despite that, it managed to introduce a gross amount of disturbing moments during its two-season run. The most infamous being the Tapeworm in the episode Mooch Master P. The episode starts with Parker mooching off of Josh's lunch, much to his annoyance. He continues to mooch off of everyone in the food court until he has earned the title the Mall Moocher. He eventually stoops to the low level of eating the raw burgers they plan on serving to customers. However, strange things begin occurring after eating the raw burger. Parker finds that food is disappearing right before his eyes, before he can even eat it. He's unable to deliver food orders either, as those disappear into thin air. Josh records Parker trying to eat, and then plays it back in slow motion, revealing that an enormous tapeworm is now living inside of his stomach, thanks to the raw burger he ate. The two get the tapeworm out, yanking it from Parker's stomach and into his arm, drives around chaotically.
The poem that someone
Afterwards,
else
an Australian
published of
man
mine.
comes up and asks to
I'm showing
buy
the
it for
original.
his zoo. The boys agree. They hand it over to him, and then the man swallows it whole.
That's the stuff.
What the fuck?
The Doll Factory, Scooby-Doo Mystery Incorporated. Despite being named Wrath of the Krampus, this is not a Christmas episode of Scooby-Doo Mystery Incorporated. Talk about a missed opportunity. What it is, however, is a disturbing romp through an abandoned doll factory, which by cartoon laws require to be unnecessarily terrifying. Shaggy calls it uber creepy, which is an understatement given that the factory is full of ultra-realistic dolls flashing with the show's simple and cartoony art style. With their hollow eyes and dry red paint blotches resembling blood, the dolls leave a scary but short impression, until their heads start turning and they begin talking, because then they leave a terrifying and lasting impression. It's unclear why or how these dolls spoke, but given the existence of the Supernatural series as opposed to the original, the dolls could actually be possessed. If there's one thing people don't like going into a Scooby-Doo episode, it's eyeless, rotting baby dolls.
The Alien Invasion, Ed, and Eddie. In one of a few half-hour-long specials of Ed, and Eddie, titled The Eds Are Coming, Jimmy has a nightmare where aliens attack the cul-de-sac, and actually takes a whole area away. Hearing the premise, knowing the nature of the show, one might assume that the nightmare is very comedic, with the stereotypical little green men aliens invading with ray guns. Instead, however, we are treated with a massive buzzsaw slamming down out of nowhere. A hellish purple vortex rips open the sky, sending down many more of these buzzsaws, with the menacing spiked mechanical tentacles swooping down and capturing a terrified Sarah. Jimmy, now bruised and beaten, desperately attempts to reach Sarah, but falls into one of the newly formed crevices, hanging on for dear life. The two attempt to reach out to one another, screaming each other's names, but it's of course no use. Jimmy's grip weakens, and he falls to his death. While it is another case of, oh, it's just a dream, this nightmare actually traumatizes Jimmy into having PTSD flashbacks to it throughout the episode.